Guys, Lab Keeper here. Today we're going to change the hydraulic oil in my log splitter. I have all the essentials, everything I need. We've got open flames, tractor, pirate flags, and we have alcoholic beverages. So we have pretty much everything we need. We're going to get going on this, and I'm going to show you how I did it. Alright guys, I bought this log splitter a couple of months back. I bought it used, and it didn't have any documentation with it. The model number, there's a tag on there, but I couldn't find the model number. So, you know, one thing you want to know before you start pulling off any hoses and draining out hydraulic fluid is, do you have 4 gallons or do you have 7 gallons in the tank? So I'm going to show you how I figured that out. Doing an oil change like this, you want to be proactive rather than reactive. So let's, we're just going to do a little bit of math and figure out what we got going on here. So, you know, the first thing I did was I took a look at the tank. You know, yeah, you can look at it, you can eyeball it, try to figure out what's in there, but why don't we just do it, just take another step here. It doesn't take much time. I measured across, you know, I got about 35.5 inches there, 4 inches there, roughly 8 inches there. So that's the dimensions of the tank. Let's call it 36 by 8 by 4 inches. All right, so what do we have? We had 36 inches times 4 inches times 8 inches equals, that's going to give us the total amount of square inches in that tank. And I already did the math. It comes out to 1,152 square inches. So now we know that there's 231 square inches in a gallon. And how do we know that? I'm not really wicked smart. My telephone told me that. So if we take, you know, 1152 and divide it by 231, which is the square inches to a gallon, it equals 4.98. 0.98 or 5 gallons. Okay, so this number here, this 5 gallons, that to me seems like it's a little bit off, because when I was looking at, you know, several models that were very similar to mine, it was either 4 gallons or 7 gallons. So what I did was I actually went back and I remeasured the tank, figuring, you know, wall thickness, maybe 3/16 1/4 inch wall thickness of steel, and I came up with a slightly different number, and it came out to about, what do I have, 35 inches times 3.5 inches times 7.5 inches. And that came out to 918. 918. So again, when I did the math, I took the 9. When I divided the 231 into 918, let's do that here real quick. It came out to 3.97. So 3.97 gallons in that tank. And that number there is the number that I'm working with. So we know we got 3.97 gallons. So now we know we need at least 4 gallons of containment to hold the fluid. And we also know what we're going to be putting back into it. So there's a couple different ways we can approach this, and my thought was this: we'll get some, you know, cardboard, put some cardboard under it. I've got some speedy dry. There goes my tripod. I've got some speedy dry over here, just in case. You want to have this stuff ready in case you have, you know, you get fluid start leaking out all over the place. Ask me how I know. You always better to be proactive with this stuff. So, you know, what I was going to do is take the wheel off, take the suction hose off, and just start putting the containers under it. And then the more I thought about it, I think what I might do, I think what I'm going to do, is I'm going to take, I've got this piece of clear plastic hose that was actually part of a siphon pump. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick it inside the tank. I'm going to tape it to the top so that the bottom, so that this hose, I want this hose down the bottom of the tank, and I don't want it to move from that position or I'll lose my siphon. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to siphon the fluid out of here into my containers so it's a more controlled way of getting the fluid out of there. And then in the end, I'll end up taking the suction hose off when there's just a little bit of fluid left. Anytime you're dealing with hydraulics, you don't want to contaminate the fluid. You could ruin your hydraulic cylinder, the pump, etc., etc. So what I'm going to do here, before I take this cap off, is I'm going to clean all around it with this brush and blow it off so I don't get any contaminants going down inside the tank that's eventually may find its way into the cylinder if it doesn't come out with the fluid that I changed. You can see it creeping along. This stuff is a little thick. It's been out in the garage. The garage has been really cold the past few days. So, you know, usually it's a little more fluid than this. I know a few of you out there are probably thinking, oh, this is great, this guy's gonna get a mouthful. Ain't gonna happen, Captain. I've done this a few times before, but if you don't feel comfortable creating your own siphon, don't do it. By all means, don't do it. If you do, try it. Always have a clear hose so you can see the liquid coming up over the hump. You don't want to ingest any kind of fluid that's not meant to be ingested. The other essential item that I have out here in the garage, fire extinguisher. You don't want to be working in your garage with an open flame without at least one. I've got a couple of fire extinguishers kicking around here, so I'm pretty comfortable with that. What I do is I turn my heater around and got it on the tail end of the log splitter here to kind of warm up the fluid that's inside the tank to get it to flow a little bit faster. While this is draining on the other side with the siphon, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to jack up the tire on this side of the log splitter and just get ready to remove the hose. You know, I could do it without taking the tire off, but you're taking the chance of getting the hydraulic fluid all over the place, so, you know, I'd just rather take the thing off for what it's worth. What we're going to do is we're going to pop off the this cap right here off the wheel hub, hence the name hub cap, right? These caps here, you just kind of tap around between the cap and the hub gently on each side. This one's actually pretty loose, and you know, sometimes you get a wedge a screwdriver in there, but you want to do it on both sides equally so you're not jamming one side or the other. This comes off pretty it's coming off pretty quick. Okay, I've never seen grease like this before on a bearing. I'll get in a little bit closer so you can see the grease in there. Pretty nasty looking. I'll show you there's a castle nut and the hub. So this is another project. I mean, I'm not going to do it right now, but I am going to clean and re-grease both of these bearings. Just another PM thing you want to do on your machine if you buy one used. I planned on lubricating the Timken bearings in the wheels themselves down the road. I never planned on hauling this log splitter over the road. Matter of fact, when I bought it, I just loaded it on my trailer. These tires are only these are 8-inch tires. You know, it's maybe it might be a 12-inch tire. Regardless, these things are way too small to be pulling it down over a public highway, roadway, whatever. Just too much wear and tear. So what I noticed though was when I looked at the axle itself, it's a little bit bent, and I noticed there was a little bit of an attitude towards the wheels. Wasn't sure exactly what it was, but the axle is a little bit bent. And if you look underneath, I don't know if you can see that, but it's been damaged. You know, the Timken bearings smoked. That's why the grease looked the way that it did. and it's still working. The Timken bearing is, I might be able to free it up. It's a little bit, so here's the Timken bearing. That's not destroyed by any stretch of the imagination. I don't plan on trailering this log splitter. This is going to stay around my yard here, so I'm not really that concerned with it. It did roll. Actually, it rolled quite well, but so there was some damage to the axle because, and I believe it's, you know, you've got all this weight. You know, you've got an I-beam, you've got a hydraulic cylinder, you've got a motor. You know, you've got probably 800 pounds of weight, you know, bearing down on a couple of 5/8 axles. There's no suspension to it. So if you go down the road and you start hitting bumps, that's an awful lot of weight to be coming down on those axles. So subsequently, you know, you can see there's a little bit of a bend in it. And I believe, I mean, I don't know that for a fact, but I believe that that is probably what happened with this, is it was taken down a road way too fast. It was bouncing around, and it, you know, started to burn up the Timken bearings because they were never greased. If you plan on trailering your log splitter, you buy one used, even if you buy it new, I would take the wheels off and make sure you get plenty of grease on those bearings. You can see we get some multi-service lubricating grease, and we've got some Castrol multi-purpose wheel bearing grease. You do not want to substitute any other grease on a wheel bearing. You only want to use wheel bearing grease. This stuff here is designed for high temperature, high pressure. It's you could find yourself really regretting not using the right grease on your wheel bearings. So, you know, for the $4, $5 for a container like this, it'll last you 30 years, like this one has lasted me. Alright guys, well, you know, I've got time on my hands, so I decided to PM the other wheel bearings. One thing you want to do, clean off the axle, clean off this part of the axle right here. This is where your seal's riding on here. Make sure it's all good and clean. Before I put the wheel back on, I'm going to put a little bit of grease on here, the rest of the axle as well. Let's take a look at the wheel. One thing you want to do is, you know, there's a couple different ways you can do it. If you really want to pack the bearings well, you know, you're going to knock them out. You knock them out with a punch. In this case here, I'm going to leave the inner bearing, Timken bearing, in place because that, to be honest, that one there is in pretty good shape as far as grease. But you want to clean off the seal. And what I did was I just wiped around, swiped a rag inside, and you're pulling it up so that you're not getting any grit down inside the hub at all. So you can clean up the seal. You just got to be careful doing it. So this is wheel 2. You can see the inner race is in there. There's a lot of grease inside. I'm going to put a little bit more in onto the inner bearing. But when you're packing a wheel with grease, wheel bearings, you don't want to fill it 100% because what happens is you're going down the road, it starts to heat up, and the grease expands. The grease needs a place to go, so it could start pushing out the bearings, and it could also push out and damage your seal. So when you repack your bearings, don't go too light, but also don't fill it up 100% because it will expand on you. So it was a couple hours to siphon the fluid out of the reservoir. As you can see, I've got, you know, what I calculated, there's about 4 gallons of hydraulic fluid there. The siphon's stopped, and what I'm about to do now is I'm going to take the hose off. So what I did was I actually jacked up with my floor jack. You can see I still have the tire off, just so I have access, better access to this clamp down here. But I jacked it up, pitched it over to the other side so that the fluid doesn't come out right away. Just gives me a little more control over the drain. You know, it took a few hours to siphon it out, but in the meantime I was able to PM the wheel bearing, so it worked out well for me. So I'm gonna actually set up the camera on a tripod. We're gonna pull this hose clamp off and pull off that bottom suction tube, and we'll drain out the rest of the reservoir. Put on some safety glasses in case the stuff spatters. Okay. So you can see it's just trickling out right now. Get a better view here. Using the GoPro camera call it my up close and personal camera. You really have to get in close to get a close up shot. Makes sense, right? So what I'm going to do now is just let this jack down a little bit. And we'll get the fluid going to the other side of the reservoir. Well, there really isn't much left in there. Just put the filler cap on just so they don't get any debris down the tank while I'm working on it. And I noticed, you can see that little hole there, this cap is vented. So I'm just going to change the pitch a little bit here. And we'll pull that filter off. Wow, not that tight. They're not supposed to be tight, but I thought it might have been a little bit tighter than that. So I'm going to go slow with it. It's already starting to run down here. And what I did was I actually measured. I measured this receptacle down here where the filter's screwing onto to see how the gasket's going to line up. Really important, especially when you're cross-referencing filters. I measured the old one here. It was 3 inches across, outside diameter. I measured the wicks that was cross-referenced, and it was 2.75, 2 3/4 inches. And to be honest, this filter lines up with the machine better than the one that came out. And that was an off-brand. It wasn't the original manufacturer's part. So food for thought. Make sure that your gasket's lining up right. Otherwise, you know what could happen there. Well, you got 4 gallons of hydraulic fluid going into this machine. Before you put your filter on, what you want to do is get a little bit of oil, hydraulic oil you're going to use, and just prime the ring. Just wipe a little bit around the gasket here, and it just helps it so it doesn't bind up when you're putting it on. Alright guys, so what I'm going to do now is I got my air compressor, I got the blower gun here, I'm putting a little tape on the end of it to create a seal. I'm going to put this in over where the filler cap is on the reservoir and try to blow some more fluid out. Putting STP, ISO, AW32 oil in. You know, again, just comments online from several people. STP is a name that's been around for a while, so I went with this. Bought 5 gallons of it. It's about $50 at AutoZone. You can see it's got the spout. This spout is depressed in. If you get a 5-gallon bucket, make sure that you get this pulled out all the way. When this comes, when you buy it, it's down flush to this metal trim right here. This pulls out, so it just gives you an advantage when you're pouring it. And what I did was I brought out the funnel. I brought this funnel here out, and I was going to use this to fill it, but then the more I looked at it, I was like, this is going to bottleneck and just start to fill up the funnel with fluid. So I took the time, went out, and I got my larger funnel. And that seems to be working good. I put about a gallon in. I put it in about 1 gallon, and then I stopped. Something you might want to consider: stop and then give it the once over. Make sure you don't have any leaks. The last thing you want to do is fill up your machine and then find out you got a leak on a hose, the clamp or something like that, that you can't fix, and you're gonna have to drain the whole thing down. So I put in a gallon, let it sit for a few minutes, and then we'll just continue to fill it. So I put in another gallon. I've got a couple gallons in there right now, approximate, and this is a 5-gallon container. We know that the tank is 4 gallons on the machine. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to stop filling it, and I'm going to fill, I've got a gallon container here that I'm going to keep my leftover fluid in, and I'm going to fill this up now, put a gallon in here, so then I'm only dealing with 4 gallons. I'm going to know pretty much when I'm getting close to being filled. I can't see with the funnel, that's in the reservoir. So this is going to just make it a little bit more accurate when it comes to topping it off, and I'm not overfilling it and having the fluid come up over the funnel and all over the place. Hey guys, I want to run this thing now. I want to purge it. I've got the reservoir filled to the level that it should be. So I want to run this thing for a couple of minutes, run the piston back and forth, and see if we can purge any air out of the system, and then we'll check it to refill. Okay, so it looks like the fluid went down a little bit. What I'm going to do is top that off now. Take it all. Here we go. This is the spare gallon container that was has the hydraulic fluid in it that's left over. You can see it's an OxyClean container. One of the first things I'm going to do when I put something else in, I'm going to mark it. You know why? Because I'm old, I'm forgetful, and 5 years from now I'm going to have this sitting on the shelf, and my wife's going to say, "Oh, do we have any OxyClean?" And I'll say, "Oh yeah, I think we got a gallon of it out in the garage." And yeah, how would that go over? So make sure you mark your container with your leftover fluid. Put the manufacturer's data right on it so you know exactly what it was that you put in there. Alright guys, well that just about wraps it up. We did the oil change. I moved 5 gallons of hydraulic oil, and I didn't have to use Speedy Dry. It's always a good day when I move 5 gallons of anything and I don't need Speedy Dry. Hope you enjoyed it.